hello and welcome to this Moneycontrol live stream. I'm Nandita, Khemka, and I have with me my colleague Aparna, Iyer. And today we will be talking about the stock that is in focus, that's Bajaj Finance. Now, this company has reported a 30% jump in its profit on a YOY basis. Stable set of numbers. We've seen AUM growth that has come in over 25%, which is a slight miss on a YOY basis, I feel, but on a quarterly basis, they have done pretty well. And even the asset quality, if you look at it, it's the best it has reported ever, right? So a lot of brokerages have spoken about this stock recently. Most of them have a buy call or a positive outlook on the stock, but of late a couple of, or 6 or 7 of them have turned fairly bearish and have a sell rating on the stock. We'll talk about that in details in a bit, but talking about the numbers, I was just reading reports by CLSA and Morgan Stanley on the stock after the earnings. So they've both retained their stance on the stock. So CLSA had recently upgraded the stock to outperform, so they have retained that stance, and Morgan Stanley still has an overweight rating on the stock. And everything else is good, but I think CLSA is fairly cautious on the company given the kind of margin guidance they have given, 40 to 50 basis points contraction. So they are turning a little cautious when the margin trajectory is concerned for Bajaj Finance. But there's a very interesting way they have described the business. I was reading the report by CLSA which said that the company has Kohli's aggression but Dravid's defense. So Aparna, you've been tracking this company for quite some time. Would you put into perspective what CLSA means when they say that, and and what is the key takeaway from the earnings since you've been tracking this company for some time?
Thanks, Nandita. So we saw some really good, strong set of numbers from Bajaj Finance Q4. You updated on the numbers already.
Right.
So CLSA and other brokerages have been bullish on the stock. A lot of brokerages still have a buy rating on the company. It's clearly perhaps as good as it could get for Bajaj Finance when we see the Q4 numbers.
Right.
They have the lowest delinquency loan ratio. They have the all-time high customer franchise. So it's a growth stock. It has always been a bet on India's consumption story, and it has been a winning bet.
I want to also add in the fact that the demand for loans has been better this quarter vis-a-vis the festive season which was in Q3.
Yes.
It has actually outdone that. Outdone the demand for loan last quarter as well, right? This time around,
which was also pointed out by some analysts we spoke to, is that Q3 is essentially the strongest quarter for Bajaj Finance because consumer lending is at its peak because of the festivals. People go out, buy things on EMIs, buy phones, buy laptops and so on. And Q4 kind of decelerates. But despite all that, Q4 numbers have been really good for Bajaj Finance. So we have seen the stock gain today. It has been a top gainer on Nifty. It all goes to how the performance has vindicated the stance of many of these analysts and the company's outlook as well. So at the analyst call last evening, the company has indicated that it can match its growth of FY23 and FY24 as well. Although a lot of investors, a lot of analysts were kind of expecting a deceleration. Two main reasons. One is a general deceleration which is expected in the economy. And secondly, Bajaj Finance, because of its consistent performance, it has reached a critical mass. Its balance sheet is now huge, and on growing on such a huge balance sheet is to the extent of 30% has never happened.
So the defense, the Dravid's defense part is basically the strong balance
sheet and the asset quality that the company has. Yes, and Kohli's aggression is of course the growth part which CLSA mentions. So far the views of brokerages are still bullish. Of course there are some issues flagged by some of the brokerages which have a sell rating, and you would note that in 2022 the stock actually underperformed Nifty.
Right, for the first time in 14
years. Yes, it has always outperformed the broad market, but in 2022 it didn't have a good run, and that kind of slight bearish outlook has extended to this year as well.
Right. Let's talk about the concerns that the analyst community have, those who have a sell rating on the stock. Is it the worry of tough competition from banks that's turning some of these brokerages cautious on the stock?
That is one of the main reasons, although competition is not new to Bajaj Finance, because Bajaj Finance has been competing with big banks for decades, and it's been winning. It has a very strong business model of unsecured consumer lending, an area where a lot of banks have had accidents. I mean, they have had an increase in NPAs, they have gone back and they have come back. But the last 1 year and so post-pandemic, every bank has been chasing the Indian retail customer.
Right.
Corporate loans have decelerated. We have not seen growth. So obviously, you name the big names: ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, smaller banks, mid-sized bank. Every bank is chasing the Indian retail customer.
Right.
So retail banking is Indian banking, and that's exactly what Rajiv Jain, MD of Bajaj Finance, actually said in last evening's analyst call. So there is intense competition. There is also a slight difference in how the competition profile is. There is a potential entry of Reliance Industries Jio into the NBFC space. Now you know Reliance is a deep-pocketed entity,
of course,
and that's been a lot of. There has been a lot of chatter about Jio's entry. I mean, we don't know any updates as such. What has been
there's
in the
a
works.
Shareholder meeting next month, if I'm not mistaken.
So we'll know. Probably we'll get an inkling of what their plans are. But the ambition of Reliance is well known. So there is that potential competition. There is existing competition by banks. And given that the valuation of banks is far, far lower than Bajaj Finance, they have re-emerged kind of an alternative to the exposure of financial services in India or to retail consumption story of India other than Bajaj Finance.
Right.
That is really weighing on the stock rather than Bajaj's own issues with business or something.
So, would you say turning into a bank would be an option for Bajaj Finance?
Ironically,
is that one thing that they can look at?
Turning into a bank may not be good for Bajaj Finance because the arbitrage, regulatory arbitrage between NBFCs and banks is almost negligible because the RBI has bridged a lot of gaps over the last couple of years. But even so, NBFCs do not have to maintain SLR and CRR. That's a big cost.
That's a big
and
cost.
that's a one-time cost, and then that continues. So Bajaj Finance will have to take on that cost, and that will clearly hit the PNL. Secondly, there is a heightened surveillance. There is a lot of regulations. I mean, the banking sector is the most regulated of industries, and Bajaj Finance will lose out on a lot of nimbleness and flexibility of doing things. They may not be able to lend certain things, but although their consumption lending business is pretty much what most banks do, so there is no as such problem there. But yeah, as a bank, there are costs, and that could somewhat crimp their growth, which is again, as I said, Bajaj is a growth stock.
Right.
So analysts see turning into a bank not exactly working out for Bajaj Finance, although it would be a boon for most NBFCs. But for Bajaj, it's not really seen as a game changer.
So how is it that Bajaj Finance can justify the premium valuation that it commands? So what are you picking up from analysts?
Their Q4 numbers it's a great start to begin with because they have delivered, and in the past they have over delivered, so to speak, in many times on growth. So the growth numbers have exceeded the expectations of some analysts, has met most of the market expectations, so that's a good start. The company is morphing into integrating tech into it because that's a space you cannot ignore now in lending. So it has a super app, it has a UPI infrastructure, it's getting into payments, so it's essentially becoming they have this omni-channel strategy, and that's being rolled out phase-wise. So in the next 2 quarters, they are going to build on the UPI infrastructure, the payment infrastructure, they are going to cater to merchants. So we could see some support to growth from there. I mean, the speed in which they get customers may not decelerate to an extent it is feared to be. Banking license, there is a chatter, but again, as I said, it's not a game changer for Bajaj Finance.
Not a game changer for Bajaj Finance. So, margins may be an issue which of course the company has flagged off any which ways in its guidance, but any other challenges aside of margins and competition from banks that that could crimp growth for Bajaj Finance going forward? Or is it now, since Q4 was so good, is it now on path to regain its past glory? How would you sum it up?
Like I said in the beginning, Bajaj is a consistent player. The problem with consistent players is that the market takes your numbers for granted. you consistently deliver 25, 26, 28% growth every year.
Yeah, they over-delivered on that, right? 30% or so, but this time now it started coming down towards that.
There is a slight deceleration we could see in the last 7 to 8 years, and in the pandemic it has gone lower. But as far as the next year is concerned, the management has given a really good guidance.
Yeah.
On margins, the management has given a guidance of contraction of 40 to 50 basis points, which is largely expected, and they are assuming that the RBI will hike once more.
Right, which largely would be the last one. That's what the expectations are.
I mean, I would say it's a prisoner of its own success because it's a consistent player, so a lot of things are taken for granted, and they have to keep delivering on these numbers that they speak of in the past. Their record stands for them, their support, but we can't tell about the future.
But so would you say there is scope for further derating then, or now since the numbers are fine, things will probably be a little smooth? Or you would see scope for more derating, given the fact that only, if you talk about it, 23 odd brokerages still have a buy call on the stock, right? It's only 7 to 8 which have a bearish or maybe a sell call on the stock. So going forward, CLSA is also retaining its stance, but it's a little cautious. But at least going by the report, there was no indication that they would turn into have a negative rating or turn into a bear when it comes to Bajaj Finance.
I think more derating instead of a derating. I think Bajaj Finance stock, from what we picked up from analysts, is that it's perfectly priced right now, and any derating would come because banks are an alternative. I mean the point that works against the stock and the business against Bajaj Finance is basically the valuation. It's a very richly priced stock.
Very rich valuation.
And it has always been so when compared to banks. But the point is, banks had really bad balance sheets some 5-6 years ago. They have cleaned up. They are retail banking now. So they have everything that Bajaj has. So why would I go for a Bajaj Finance when I can get a cheaper stock, maybe for HDFC or an ICICI? That's clearly the argument in the market. Other than that, it's a winning bet on business. It's a good balance sheet, and I don't think any brokerages are removing Bajaj Finance from their scope or focus, in at least for next couple of years.
Right, so that's the call. Even though it has reported a strong set of numbers, looks like the street is fairly okay with it right now. We'll see whether or not there is any further derating on the stock or not. But for now, the performance has been pretty good, and the markets are reacting pretty positively because it has emerged as one of the top gainers on the Nifty. With that, I think we're fairly done with this discussion on Bajaj Finance. So we will take your leave. Thanks a lot for watching. For more news and updates, stay tuned to Moneycontrol.